Cloud roles and boundaries. In this section, we will look at the various cloud roles like cloud provider, cloud consumer, cloud service owner, cloud service administrator, auditor, broker, carrier. These are roles that you should know as a cloud professional. These are terms that may be used as we go through this particular class. So it's really important for you to understand that. We'll also look at the organizational boundary and the trust boundary that exists between the cloud provider and the cloud consumer. So what is the objective? As part of this particular section, we'll be looking at the definitions of these various cloud roles, and then we'll look at the organizational and trust boundary that exists between the cloud provider and the cloud consumer. If you recall, in the previous section, we looked at the NIST 800-145 document or paper that was published by NIST that defines what cloud computing is. Well, NIST also has another document, which is NIST 500-291, that discusses cloud roles. This is another very important document that I strongly suggest that you take a look at, but we will be covering the important aspects of this particular document in this section and in other sections. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the document. This is the 500-291 document. It's a much bigger document than the 800-145 document. And in this document, they actually define the various roles that are there and how the various roles interact through different services. So it's a pretty important document. Again, it's a theoretical document, but it's a good idea to read the document and understand it, right? So they get into these different models, and then they get into the interactions that are going on, right? So I leave it for you guys to look at the document. Let's continue on. Now let's look at a cloud provider. A cloud provider is an organization that provides cloud-based IT resources or services to cloud consumers. So they are basically companies or organizations that are giving you IT resources or IT services to you as a cloud consumer. Now, I haven't defined what a cloud consumer is. Let's currently look at the definition of a cloud provider. It's an organization that's giving you IT resources. Well, who are these organizations? What are these organizations? They could be internal organizations within an organization, which is giving you private cloud, or they could be external organizations like the Amazon Web Services cloud provider, or the Google Cloud Platform provider, or the Rackspace cloud provider, or Heroku, Google App Engine, Salesforce. All these different companies are cloud providers. They're giving you cloud services to you as a cloud consumer. They make these IT resources or services available to cloud consumers, which is us, as per agreed upon SLA guarantees. Many of these cloud providers actually publish SLAs. They tell you that I'll give you a virtual machine, and this virtual machine has 95% availability. I'll give you storage. My storage has 98% availability, and this is how you can make it 99% availability. So they have all these SLAs that they guarantee. They're also tasked with any required management and administrative duties to ensure smooth service. So a cloud provider does not just go ahead and install some software out there, install some hardware out there and say, go use it. They have routine management that is going on. They have to make sure that these services are up and running, the SLAs are met. So there is some management that they are expected to do as part of being a cloud provider. They provide their own IT resources. That's typically what they do. If you look at Amazon Web Services, which is a cloud provider, they have their own hardware, they have their own storage, they have their own network devices, and they're actually making all these network devices available to you. Now, there can be some cloud providers that would actually lease these equipments, but most cloud providers actually own their own IT resource equipments. So here are examples of cloud providers. Amazon Web Services, a classic cloud provider company, one of the top cloud provider companies. Microsoft Azure is another one. Google Cloud Platform, Rackspace. And by the way, all these guys are IaaS cloud providers. Now, I know I haven't discussed what IaaS is yet in great detail, but it's infrastructure as a service. It's virtual machines, storage, networking, all available as a service. That's what they do. And by the way, these cloud providers, Amazon Web Services, Azure, and Google Compute Platform or Google Cloud Platform, they operate at different levels. They offer IaaS services. Sometimes they also provide PaaS services. For example, Amazon has a PaaS service called Elastic Beanstalk. Google has a PaaS service called Google App Engine. Heroku is another company that provides a PaaS service. Zoho and Salesforce are companies that provide SaaS services, and these guys are providing PaaS services. So what I'm trying to say to you is that companies that offer these services are called cloud providers. Now, there are also certain organizations or companies that give you the necessary software for you to implement your own private cloud. For example, VMware Cloud. VMware is an organization that has VMware vCloud that allows you to enable to have your own private cloud. Same thing with OpenStack, which is an open source project that allows you to have your own private cloud. So who is a cloud consumer? A cloud consumer is an organization or a human using IT resources offered by cloud provider. Now, as part of this particular class, we will act as a cloud consumer and we will interact with a cloud provider such as Amazon Web Services in order for us to provision our IT resources. So we are the cloud consumers in that case. But cloud consumers can be organizations, right? So what I'm showing you here are two organizations. There is the organization A, which is the cloud consumer, and there's the organization B, which is really cloud A, which is a cloud provider. So we have cloud consumer and we have cloud provider. And the dotted line over here shows you the trust boundary. The cloud consumer is actually accessing a cloud service. If you recall in the previous diagram, I showed you a yellow ball or a golden ball that describes a cloud service. So the cloud consumer is accessing a cloud service that is available as part of the cloud provider. And of course, the cloud provider has SLA guarantees, and the cloud consumer, if he is satisfied with SLA, will continue to use the service. A cloud consumer consumes a variety of cloud services provided by the cloud provider. There are IaaS services, there are PaaS services, and there are SaaS services. What I'm showing you are the various IaaS services such as storage, CDN, which is content delivery network, backup and recovery services, compute services, which is launching VMs, platform hosting, which are your hosting services, and also service management. So these are all different IaaS services that are available for cloud consumers to consume. There are also PaaS services like business intelligence services, database services, application deployment services, integration services, development and testing services that a cloud consumer can consume. A cloud consumer can also consume SaaS services like ERP solutions or ERP services, billing services, sales services, CRM solutions, which is customer relation management services, email services, a whole bunch of SaaS services that are available to a cloud consumer to consume. So really a consumer is consuming services that are available or that are provided by the cloud provider. A cloud service owner. A cloud service owner is a person that owns the cloud service. All right, it's important for you to understand this. In this diagram, what I'm showing you is that you have a cloud provider, which is cloud provider X. That's the cloud provider X. Here is the cloud consumer. The cloud consumer is right here. And the cloud consumer can go to the cloud provider and launch his or her own cloud service so that other people can use it. You can think of Joe, the pizza shop owner, providing a cloud service, which is a way by which users can order pizza online, and he's offering that particular cloud service, deploying that particular service in the cloud X's, which is the cloud provider's premises. That's this cloud premise right here. So the point I'm trying to show you here is that a cloud consumer can launch or can deploy his services inside a cloud provider so the end users can use that particular service. Now, this is a guy right here, so the end users can actually access that particular cloud service. So that is the definition of a cloud service owner. A cloud service owner is somebody that owns a cloud service. In this particular case, Joe's Pizza Shop. Joe has ordered his own service and is deploying it into the cloud. A cloud service owner could be the cloud provider itself. Here, what I'm showing you is that you have a cloud provider called CloudX. This is the cloud provider's boundary. The cloud provider himself has provided a cloud service that a cloud consumer can interact with. Even the end users can actually interact with this particular cloud service if the permissions are open. So the point I'm trying to make is that a cloud service is a service that can be owned by either a cloud provider or it can be owned by a cloud consumer. But the cloud service is really running under the boundary of a cloud provider. Now let's look at the definition of a cloud service administrator. A cloud service administrator is a person or organization that is responsible for administering cloud-based IT resources, including cloud services. What I'm showing you here is a cloud resource administrator, which in this particular class is going to be you. You're going to be the cloud resource administrator. You're going to be interacting with a cloud provider. Here we have a cloud provider, which is called CloudX, and they have their own premise, which is their premise right here. And a cloud resource administrator, which is also a cloud consumer, can own a service that is deployed in the CloudX. The cloud resource administrator can also communicate with the cloud provider to launch a virtual machine. So this is a virtual machine that has been launched. And inside that virtual machine, a cloud service has been placed. You can think of Joe, the pizza guy, launching a virtual machine. And in that virtual machine, launching a cloud service, which is a web server, so users can order their pizza online, so that the end users, which are consumers, can consume that particular service. The point I'm trying to make is you, as the cloud resource administrator, are responsible for administrating this cloud service. You can launch VMs on the fly, you shut down VMs on the fly, you can launch services inside the VMs. All those things can be done by the cloud service administrator. Now, this relationship can become a little bit more complicated. Let's try to understand this. What I'm showing you here is the cloud consumer, and I'm also showing you here the cloud provider. So what you're seeing on this side is the cloud provider, and what you're seeing over here on this side is the cloud consumer. The cloud provider has a cloud resource administrator, and the cloud resource administrator has actually launched a virtual machine. Inside that virtual machine, he has launched a cloud service, and the cloud, in this particular case, the cloud resource administrator is actually a member of the cloud provider. This cloud resource administrator is launching a virtual machine, is launching a cloud service, which can be consumed by the cloud consumer, which could be a third-party organization, or it could be consumed by a cloud user, which is a guy that's using that particular service. The point I'm trying to make is, if you become a cloud professional and you become a cloud service administrator, you could work for an organization that is a cloud consumer, but you could also work within cloud providers to launch cloud services within the cloud provider. That's a case of you working for Amazon.com or Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform versus working for a company like AT&T that might be a cloud consumer. There is also this role called cloud auditor. A cloud auditor is actually a third party. Often it's an accredited third party that conducts independent assessments of the cloud environments. So this third party organization, an example of such an organization is cloudaudit.org. They perform audits. Well, they perform audits for compliance and standards. security standards, SLA standards. They do all these audits, and their main purpose is to provide an unbiased assessment or report of the cloud provider and publish a paper so that it can strengthen the relationship, the trust relationship between a cloud provider and consumer. If you go to Amazon.com, Amazon Web Services, if you go to Google Cloud Provider, you can actually download certifications that cloud auditors have done for Google Cloud Provider and Amazon Cloud Provider and Azure Cloud Provider that prove to you as a cloud consumer that they are doing the right things for you. When they say that their systems are secure, when they're saying that their systems are following the SLAs that they have published, these cloud auditors have actually guaranteed that. So it's a good thing. A cloud broker. A cloud broker is an organization that sits between the cloud consumer and multiple cloud providers. So you have your cloud user or cloud consumers over here, and the cloud broker is something that sits in between. And these cloud consumers now are actually using the cloud API that is provided by the cloud service broker rather than using specific provider API. So rather than the user directly interfacing with the SaaS service provided by vendor A or provided by cloud provider A and using another API provided by another vendor, they actually talk to the cloud service broker in a uniform way. And these brokers have all the relationships with all these different cloud providers so that you only communicate to one guy. That's the idea. And RightScale.com actually offers such a service. There's also this role called a cloud carrier. A cloud carrier is a party that is responsible for providing wire level, which is basically network connectivity between the cloud consumer and then the cloud provider. So you have the cloud consumer, you have the cloud provider, you want to have connections. Now, typically the connections are TCP/IP, internet, over the World Wide Web, over the internet. But if you want, you can have dedicated lines that can go between the cloud consumer and the cloud provider, and a cloud carrier is the one that actually makes that happen. This role typically is assumed by network and telecommunications companies such as Comcast, AT&T, and Sprint. You also want to understand this concept called organization boundary or organizational boundary. The idea here is that a cloud provider who's represented as a cloud over here may have services, may have cloud services, may have virtual machines, but they have a boundary. That's the organizational boundary, which I have drawn as a dotted line, and that's how I'm going to be representing throughout this particular class at different points. There's an organization A that is a cloud service consumer, that's a cloud consumer, and they have their own boundary also. So everybody has their own boundary. Everything that's happening within the organization A is within this boundary, and everything that's happening within the cloud provider is within this particular boundary. Well, why does this become important? It becomes important because you have organization A that has its own trust boundary. You have Cloud A that has its own trust boundary. And then you also have a trust that has to go across the two organizations. Because if you are a cloud consumer and if you have services running within your organization that is going to be communicating with the cloud services that is provided by Cloud A, there is a shared responsibility that we have. That's a shared trust boundary. We'll talk more about this shared trust boundary as we go through. So, in summary, we saw that there are some common roles that are associated with cloud, such as the cloud provider, which is the organization that provides the cloud services, cloud consumer, which is the organization that uses the cloud service owner, which could be a cloud consumer or a cloud provider that owns a cloud service. There's also a cloud resource administrator, which is the guy that is going to be launching the cloud services. There's the cloud auditor that audits the cloud providers. There's also a cloud broker that sits in between the cloud consumer and the cloud provider so that the cloud consumer can use a single API. And there is the cloud carrier that's offering network and telecommunication services. In this class, we will not be playing the role of the cloud provider. We'll be playing more the role of a cloud consumer. We'll also play the role of a cloud service owner because we'll be launching our own cloud service. We'll also play the role of a cloud administrator because we're going to be launching cloud services. We'll not play the role of the cloud auditor or the cloud broker or the cloud carrier. We also learned about the organizational boundary representing the various organization, and we saw that that would be represented by a dotted line. That's the organization boundary, and each organization has its own boundary. Then we talked about the trust boundary, which is the trust that exists within an organization, whether it's the cloud organization or in other words, the cloud provider organization or the cloud consumer organization. But then when the cloud consumer organization is communicating with the cloud provider, then there has to be a larger trust that has to exist between the two of them. And then later on, when we get into security, we'll talk about this trust boundary and the shared security model that the cloud provider and the cloud consumer agrees to.